Alright guys, we're going to do a little bit of hydraulic testing. The first thing we're going to do is check our stall pressure. We're going to use this gauge with adapters I've put together. At your dealership, you're probably going to have something similar to that. It might be on a hose or it might be solid fittings like this. Either one will work just fine. So first we're going to do that, and then we're going to test flow on this. We're going to use this inline flow meter. So we'll start her up and try it. So what you saw here was one coupler that tested pretty good and one that tested pretty bad. The one on the left-hand side you saw whenever I pressurized it. The gauge came up, and whenever I let the handle back to neutral, it held pressure there. It very slowly went down, but not very fast. Whenever I tested the right-hand coupler, pressure came up the same whenever I moved the lever. But as soon as I let the lever go back to neutral, it very quickly went down, and so that's bad. Now, for each different tractor, you're going to have a specification as for how much leakage it can have. It might be a certain number of PSI per second or per minute drop, and you just have to check and see how it compares to the spec. Remember, if you do not have load checks in the SCV, then it will leak down really fast. If you do have load checks, then it should hold pretty well. For example, the spec for an 8000 series tractor is that it should not leak down more than about 420 PSI in 20 seconds. So, next we have a flow meter. This hose right here is coming out of the flow meter, so we're going to hook it up to the right-hand coupler. The other hose, you want to make sure these are good and clean, especially if they get drug across the floor. The other hose we're going to connect to the left-hand coupler. We're going to make sure that our flow meter is all the way open. It's all the way open. Then we're going to wash the flow meter. I'm going to start it up and we'll flow some oil. So let's talk about what you saw there. Whenever I started to turn down the restrictor, and the pressure gauge started to come up. Whenever the pressure gauge started to come up, you could also hear the engine load a little bit. Whenever the engine started to load, then the flow meter indicator started to come down. We can actually use this to heat hydraulic oil, and the way we do it is by flowing oil through it like we just did. And what we would do is turn down the restrictor until the engine load was somewhat high and the flow was also high. If we turn this down too far, it will stop all the flow, and then we won't heat the oil anymore. So whenever we take a flow reading, we always do it with a certain amount of pressure back here. The reason that we do that is because we need to put a load on the system to accurately test it. If we put a load on the system, then that will cause oil to leak any place where it could be leaking. And in that case, we would be able to find the problem if it had one.